We can start now. Hello and welcome to our conference and to our workshop. As you know, we are online this year, so we will not have the opportunity to meet each other in person and to enjoy the beautiful town of Zadar, but yet we are here and we are ready to learn and to share experiences. As you know, the title of this workshop is Good Practices in Academic Writing. As this is a workshop, you are all, of course, encouraged to interact. You can ask questions by writing them into the Q&A section that is at the bottom of your screen. This workshop is organized by Croatian Association for Scholarly Communication, and our speakers are Vladimir Mrša and Dado Čakalo. Vladimir Mrša is the president of the association. He's professor at the Faculty of Food Technology and Biotechnology at the University of Zagreb, and he's also editor-in-chief of the journal Food Technology and Biotechnology. Dado Čakalo works at the Institute for Medical Research and Occupational Health and is manuscript editor at Archives of Industrial Hygiene and Toxicology. So now I will turn off my camera and let you enjoy the workshop.
It's quite a tongue breaker, isn't it, to pronounce these names of the journals. Professor Mrša and I will be talking about issues that we encounter on everyday basis, I suppose, yes. And try to actually shower you with some advice how to overcome certain problems. Professor Mrša will be talking about structural aspects of writing a manuscript, actually a research manuscript, and I will be focusing more on two aspects that have been neglected pretty much in any writing, especially in scholarly, which is the reader and storytelling. And Professor Mrša, you can have a floor.
Thank you. Good day, everybody. And as you have heard, I am an editor of a journal. So but I'm also a scientist. So I see this process of writing papers from two different views. I am a writer, but I'm also the one who evaluates and publishes the manuscripts that other people have written. So at every research cycle, we have the beginning with writing a project and obtaining the money for your research, and eventually it ends up with publishing papers. Today, in this short workshop, actually, we'll talk only about this central part of the process, which is writing a paper. When you start writing, or before you start writing a paper, or perhaps much before that, you have to do your research, to go along your project. And I think the important message for everybody in science is that when you plan your experiments, when you write your project, keep in mind that your results have to be published, have to be put in a scientific paper. And if the project is not well planned, it is very likely that also the papers will not be good. When you write your paper, you are in fact telling a story. Just like every storyteller, your scientific manuscript, your scientific text, has the same structure or the same components as a criminalistic novel. So the first thing you do is you describe the state of the art. It's the part usually called introduction, but it is the same thing as Agatha Christie does at the beginning of every of her novels. She sets the screen, she sets the stage the action that will go along. So you describe in what scientific surrounding, in what scientific environment your research has its roots. Then you define the questions. Defining questions is okay, the murder has taken place, and who is the murderer? Once you have your questions, you have to define the path to the answers. You have to describe how you plan to get to answer these questions. So this is where Hercule Poirot comes to stage and thinks of how to solve the case. And then you describe your results in a certain order. This is the central part of the manuscript. You engage the police and they are searching for the murderer. Finally, you put your results in the context. This is the part that is usually called discussion. Poirot summons all the characters and puts them in a certain stage, and now he is about to tell who the murderer is. And finally, you draw conclusions. The conclusions are the answers to the questions you have posed at the beginning. You disclose the murderer. When describing the state of the art, several pieces of suggestions. One is to point out the significance of the area you're working on. Why is it important to do this research? Why should the readers read it? Why should the readers find it interesting? Then you present the present knowledge. This is not the typing error. Present present knowledge. Science is a puzzle. It's a mosaic. Our knowledge is a mosaic, and some pieces of some stones are there in the mosaic, and some are missing. There are gaps in our puzzle. So the first thing is show what we know about it, which pieces are there, and which pieces are missing. And do not be too extensive, otherwise you will lose your audience somewhere halfway through the introduction. They will never get to your results. So the main feature of this part of the text is informativeness. It has to be informative. You have to give audience, you have to give the readers enough data to be able to understand why you are doing this research, but not too many. And then you define the questions. And there is a short task or exercise that I usually give to my students. And this is, you define the questions. You, in your paper, you want to answer some scientific questions. See how these questions start. If they start with what, these questions will be least interesting, because these questions will describe the phenomenon. You are scratching the surface. You are describing what is there. If your question starts with who or where, that's a little more interesting, because you're trying to find out something about this phenomenon. Who is responsible for it? Where does it take place? But try to have at least one question starting with why, because then you are tackling the mechanisms. You are trying to understand why this phenomenon takes place. And these are the most interesting questions. The features of the questions are clarity and relevance. If you start with questions that are not clearly stated, then it is very likely that through the manuscript you will get lost and trying to find the answers to not so clear questions. And the relevance, of course, you have to show that these questions are really those that the scientific community would like to have answers to. And then you define your path to the answers. This is usually a part of the manuscript that is called materials or methods or methodology or experimental procedures, experimental strategy. There you explain the rationale of the methods you want to use to answer the questions you have raised. And you want to explain the strategy. The strategy will come out of this methodology that you want to use. And this part of the manuscript has to look a little different, because its main features are precision and completeness. Because science is about reproducibility. So when you do some research, you have to allow other peers, your colleagues, to repeat your experiments, to repeat your strategy, to repeat your methodology. Not so much because somebody wants to see if you have made a mistake, but more often because if I read something in the literature, I want to continue this work. And to be able to continue this work, I need the fundamentals. So I will probably have to repeat some of the experiments that somebody else has done, just to build up on the fundamentals these labs have, or these colleagues have set. This is why I will need every single detail of the methodology that somebody has used. Every single detail is important. And then you describe your results. You bring your results. This is, of course, the essence of your story. This is the main part of the manuscript. And this is the one you are proud of. You can present every result in more than one way. You all probably know that. So decide how to do it in a most adequate way. And what is the most adequate? Well, a very simple example is you get a result is a set of numbers. You can present this set of numbers in a graph, so graphically, or you can present it in a table. Clearly, everybody would, the reader would prefer to see a graph, to see a graphical representation of your results to a table. But sometimes all these data are important, and you cannot present them in a simplified manner, and you have to give a table. And sometimes this table has 200 numbers. Keep in mind that not all your results are equally important. So my suggestion always is choose the most important, the most relevant data out of this table and show it in a different color, so that you focus the attention of the reader to what is the most important, and not to dissipate it through all your results. Sometimes keep in mind that you do not necessarily have to show all your results. This is the hardest way this is the hardest suggestion to give to a PhD student, for instance, because he has put, or she has put, a lot of effort to get all these results. And now you tell her that some of the results are not so much important, and they will just blur the most important parts of her work. So maybe it's better to focus on the most important, on the most relevant data that you, or results that you have obtained, and try not to put them in a forest of less important data, and order your results to the needs of the reader. And sometimes the logical way the results are presented is not the one you have. It has been obtained, because your experiments are sometimes for very pragmatic reasons done in a different order. Keep in mind that the ordering of results creates the story. Every result has to come out of or be the result of the experiment done previously, and the next experiment has to come out of the results that you have presented before. The features, simplicity and directness. You have to be direct. You have to direct the result. This is what I mentioned when I said that you do not necessarily have to show all the data you have got. and do it in a simple way because the reader has to understand it. And then you put your results in a context. This is usually the part of the manuscript called discussion. In this part, you show how your results fit the current knowledge, what are the new stones in the mosaic that you have discovered, and you're putting it in filling the gaps and making expanding our current knowledge of the area of the field that your research is in. And there you have to be interactive because you have to compare results. You have to see, sometimes you have to compare your results and put them in relations of in the relation to other results, not necessarily in your own field. Sometimes they will have more importance, general importance, if they are presented in a broader context. But you have to be concise. Try not to because much too often discussions are written so that the writer wanders away from the topic and ends up somewhere in a place where that has nothing to do with the manuscript itself. So try to stick to the topic your results are in. At the end, you draw conclusions. The conclusions are answers to your questions. Try not to give too many conclusions because not everything again is equally important. Try to focus to the most important conclusions that are coming out of your results. Do not repeat the results. Conclusions are conclusions. These are they are coming out of the results, but they are not results themselves. And relate your conclusions to the questions. Now you have answered your questions. You started with a scientific question and you have reached the answer. The feature, I was thinking about what to put here as the most important feature of your conclusions. And perhaps it's attractiveness, because you have answered something that is, at the beginning you said it was important. And you have set important scientific questions. Now you have come to the answers. This has to be attractive. This has to be appealing for the reader. So try to convince the reader that what you have found out as the final result of your research is something that is important. At the end of my part of the talk, several practical advice coming from our experience in the editorial board of the paper, of the journal. Write in proper English. This is extremely annoying for the editors and reviewers when they get manuscripts written in poor English, if of course English is the language of the manuscript. If you're not so proficient, many people are usually not proficient in English, or English is not their native language or mother tongue. So if it is the case, give it to somebody who is proficient and try to get somebody to read through the manuscript and correct it to be read. Sometimes we really get manuscripts that are hardly readable because the English is so poor. Observe the instructions to authors. Every journal has a section, instructions to authors, and it is accessible through internet. Please obey them in details. Every dot and comma in the references is important. It matters. Somebody has it has its importance, and somebody has to correct it. If your manuscript is written sloppy, remember something quite important, and which is the editor will assume that your research has been done the way your manuscript has been written. If the manuscript is sloppy, we will suspect that your research has been done in the same way, and this will repel us from your manuscript. Choose an appropriate journal. Do not send your manuscript to the journal which has a different scope. Read several papers from the journal you're sending the manuscript to. See if they publish such papers. You will avoid the delay in publication, because if you send it to a wrong journal, they will send it back. and then you will have to find another journal and so on, and the time will go back. And finally communicate with the editors and the reviewers. Write a good cover letter with your manuscript. You can say, okay, enclosed, please find the manuscript under the title so and so. But if you say, okay, here we tried to do something for the first time, and we think it is important, we think it's something that will fill the gap in our knowledge, and the editors will appreciate this, and also the reviewers. When you get the reviews, try or not try, but definitely respond to every comment of the reviewers, and because the reviewers will not appreciate if you just skip some of their comments and do nothing with your manuscript. Hopefully, this will bring to the success of your manuscript, and it will eventually get published.
Oh,
so
it's me.
Dado.
Okay, thank you. I hope you have remembered all these tips, and well, I'll try to be simple in terms that I hope you will remember two things about writing, a paper, and the first thing is. I know it may sound obvious, but the first thing is that all good communication is the responsibility of the person delivering the information and not the person receiving it. So it's all on you, or if you're a reader, God bless us all. And there are just, this is how our brain works, so I've read. There is a nice book I can recommend if you can see it, but you'll also get it in the reading list. That every communication, good communication, consists of two parts. These are emotion and the reason, I mean, some logic, which is actually a story, some narrative. And they are so intertwined because we then remember things, actually. We remember information we learn. There was a study not long ago, so I read that they had students, read papers or listen, I don't know, to a lecture with their hands dipped in buckets full of ice, And apparently, the control group was performed much worse than the ones with their hands in the ice. So you can see, of course, there was an emotion, negative emotion, that kind of triggered, you to remember. This is how we work. Probably something to do with biology, but also a number of experts in writing say that good emotion and positive emotion is a much better trigger for you to remember things. The problem with researchers, with authors, is that they fear emotion for some reason, although most of them or you are so passionate about the subject you're working on. And this is probably the years, or centuries of some kind of numbing down our narrative, which started in Renaissance, when people were actually writers as well, and now you have to be kind of objective, but objectivity obviously doesn't come from the writing style, it comes from something else. There are two, as I said, there are two parts, the heart and head of communication. And the thing is, where we usually go wrong is, as I already announced before, is that we forget the reader. We don't empathize with the reader, and which is actually funny because every one of us is a reader first. And we know all the ailments, all the problems of the texts we read, why they're boring, what's so illogical, and so on. Some of this comes from what they call a theory of mind, and I suggest you read Steven Pinker as well, and Alan Alda's book. But the thing is that sometimes we as authors just forget that readers are not in our mind, that they do not share what we think. This is a typical childish issue, you know, the children believe while they're very young, you know, that actually we can read their minds so they don't lie, you know. So when they first learn deception, then they learn that there is something else, you know, with this. For instance, I don't have time now for you, but I wanted to know, I could tap down now a song or clap it down a song everybody knows, and I'm sure that at least half of you wouldn't recognize it. So, did you recognize? No. No. It's happy birthday to you. So you see, this is the problem. We start with, I have a song in my mind, you know, and I think if I clap it down, you know, then they get the whole picture. It doesn't work. So, the thing is, I want to show this. This is kind of an experiment in writing. Readers do not simply read the text they receive, you know. So they interpret it. It's an automatic thing, you know. It comes from several parts. So if I throw at you these words you see here well, this is in alphabetical order, you'll probably try to make a story out of it. And actually there is one of the apocryphal or, you know, falsely attributed stories to Ernest Hemingway is that he actually wrote the shortest and a very emotional novel out of these words. So see, we actually make up stories. If you don't have something, we'll make up stories anyway. And this can go terribly wrong, you know, if we are talking about research articles. So there is this guy, he's a professor at Duke University. His name is George Gopin, who actually was has developed this kind of approach, which is based on readers' expectations. And this is what we as authors, you know, or editors should kind of imagine. This requires our empathy to put ourselves in other people's shoes, in readers' shoes. But more or less, we already know what these expectations are. The problem is that we should actually try to meet them. So one of the expectations is, oh, this is, okay. This is, whose story is this? So it can be a story from a perspective of a patient, or it can be a story about a compound, right? Well, but you should always keep that in mind, you know. So what is going on there? This is what we also expect as to understand the context and the word which convey, yeah, which convey to what is taking place. This part, which is also very much, for me, especially important, is that bricks in a certain structure, which is, say, section, chapter, or sentence, you know, should be connected with mortar. This mortar should link them back and forward. So one brick should relate to another, you know, and you could go back. Often is the case that we actually don't have that link between the bricks. One of the approaches Gopin especially insists on is that in the sentence, for instance, or even in parts of it, we should always make place for emphasis, and emphasis usually in our mind comes at the end. Well, but I'll get back to this. So, like Vlado said, every research paper has actually a great potential to be a good story, crime story, love story, if you wish, anything else. Every story has these elements: conflict, which usually involves suspense, and I'll get back to it. Well, emotions. Oh, I don't think we have this last one, but okay, don't worry. So it has, it's not the last presentation. I'm sorry about this. Oh, I'm sorry about this. Well, it has characters. Now try to remember, disregard this slide. Characters, conflict, climax, and resolution, or denouement, as they say in literature. These are the basic bricks you actually build your story on, and you can have all these elements in your research paper. I won't go because Vlada has already gone to this, but I just want to point out that you have a story at the level of article, at the level of each section, at the level of a chapter. So each chapter should be one story, and each sentence should be one story. Everything here should be one story. If you keep that in mind, you'll probably write better already. Vlada has done it, so I won't go much into here, although as a manuscript editor, and it's been 25 years that I've been working this job, I found that intro is probably the most important part, especially the most important thing to me. If you set up the scene and you know the main characters, if you set up the whole thing well, finishing with the main aim and with the basic question you're after to answer, then you have actually done half of the job. The rest is just easy. Of course, you can set this scene up so that it looks like you can rise tension, you can make a suspense out of it because you have a missing piece. It's a conflict. You can put in frustration in it, emotion, which will even be more memorable. Such as there was this story about a physician, I don't remember his name now, who invented the thinnest glass in the world. It was quite popular. I don't know whether you've heard of it. It was all a mistake. Actually, they wanted something else, and they came up with the thinnest glass in the world. And he actually described this frustration in his story, about the method, which is what makes it memorable. Actually, he got quite a lot of projects after that, and invited so many. What time? Okay, well, we're in time. So pay attention to this suspense. We can play with it. What about materials and methods? Okay, Vlada has said you have to be very precise and so on, but you could also do it as a recipe, which cannot be interesting in a way, or a crime story, like I said, like this story about the thinnest glass in the world. It's up to you, of course. There are some expectations as a scholarly reader you have, so probably you're afraid to cross them. You don't have to, but you can still play within some kind of imaginary acceptability. It's all much up to you and the readers you give your story to before you publish it. Okay, article results. These are the parts of the good story. So you have a climax. The results are actually the climax. It's already cathartic. You have a result, and then you have a resolution. And in this resolution, what do you think a resolution is? Actually, it's a discussion, more or less, and conclusion, where you actually put those things you've now resolved in some perspective, kind of travel back to where you started, to the introduction. But what I usually find in discussions is something like this. I can see it now. Let's see. You get what you had, then you get what somebody else has had, and this is on the level of the discussion. It's a conceptual problem. So you get your research, then you compare it to somebody else's research, but actually you don't. There is a missing link between it. This is what I was talking about, Gaupan's idea, and this is a conceptual link missing. So. This is how I sometimes feel when I read discussions. It's actually quite more often than not. And on the chapter, if chapter is supposed to be a story, so now you can imagine. I have added these sentences here, and then you get something else, which is not at all related to what precedes or what follows. This is just, of course, I invented this one, but. I think you can identify, or it does remind you of your own experience if you're editors or even authors. Everybody is a reader, so no news to you. And on the sentence level, Gopin suggests, and which is sounds quite logical, but most of us actually should be aware of it, that the first information that comes in the sentence, especially in English, is the topic of the sentence. This is not the most important information. This is the setting. So it's kind of a story. And action and resolution come to the end. So when you write, of course, it doesn't have to be so, you don't have to write, you know, every sentence like that. But then you should bear in mind that the emphasis usually comes at the end, unless you turn some things around. Of course, rules are there to break. So you on the other levels too, you know, you kind of pass from old information to new. Then new information becomes old, and you carry on with new information. So this is one of the basic advices you'll find everywhere. And there are some more. Oh, I've skipped quite a lot. Jonathan Franzen is an American writer I think most of you are familiar with, and he's a good writer. And what he learned when he was quite young, you know, at the editorial office of New Yorker, is this, you know. And I think this applies, even though it's research, you know, this applies to research papers as well. Personal experience. If you're personal, you kind of get your reader to identify with you, to relate to you, just as you relate to the reader, you know. And this makes your piece memorable. So why not admit that you were thinking like this and then you changed your mind, you know, or made a mistake. There are so many pieces about, I mean, there are so many studies which actually came up with negative hypothesis, that is failed hypothesis, and actually there are journals that publish it. But getting personal doesn't mean that you have to speak about I or some, there is a level, but still you can be very personal, and fellow scientists will relate to you better and remember your way of thinking. Then then you should focus on the story. We've covered it. And there is one good advice, which I don't know whether you can see, but when you organize material, whether it's a sentence, whether it's a chapter, whether it's a section, but usually on the chapter level, like goes with like, which means if you're talking about something, you continue to talk about this, or you talk about something and say what it produced and so on. So like goes with like, and this followed that. These are two basic principles everybody should actually observe, and they will be easier to understand. Of course, this what we throw at you now, it's not a workshop. It's just a bunch of tips, very clustered, you know, and I hope only some of them stick, you know. But the basic thing is that you always improvise, seek feedback from your colleagues, friends, family. Even we don't have time for that, you know, family, and write, you know, or speak, you know. So as you proceed, you know, an essay, he says an essay, but research paper is a mirror of you, you know. It reveals the sloppiness of your thinking. So when you read your piece, you suddenly realize, as I've realized now, that my slides are, you know, kind of not the ones I intended. They reveal what's wrong with it, you know. So you should always give yourself time to revise, you know, which sometimes you don't have, of course. As you improve your quality of writing, you know, this improves the quality of your thought, and that's true, really. It's all related. But what it's not an art. Well, what it means is we can throw tips at you as much as we want, you know. But the thing is, you have to find it in yourself. And this is why I insist so much on empathy for the reader, you know, because we are all emphatic beings, save for a few people who are usually institutionalized. And we should stand. So just seek deep into your soul, as Buddha would say. And tips don't transform, experience does. So this is why Vlad and I are probably going to do a workshop proper now and work with whoever will be interested in this. And this is my reading list. You'll probably get it as materials from the. And thank you. This is it.
Thank you. And at the end, you see our mail addresses. So since the time is very limited now, and we will probably not be able to answer to all your questions, you can pose any question you want to our mail addresses, and we'll try to respond to your questions in a day or two. So thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Vlad and Dado. As I can see, we don't have questions in Q&A, but I believe that we heard some very interesting and useful advices for you. There were 115 participants at this workshop. As far as I can see, many of them are doctoral students, so I have one question, if you allow me. How important are similar workshops for doctoral students as future scientists? So would your work as editors be easier if your authors had proper training in academic writing at the time when they had been students or young scientists?
Me as a university teacher, definitely so. In many programs now, either in master programs or in PhD programs, there is some sort of training, of courses that include also academic writing, but they are rather short and do not really equip students for writing. And yeah, this would be of course for an editor, we want to get better manuscripts. This is clear, and because there are many aspects of this question. One very important, I think, is that there are too many good research. A lot of good research that has not been published because of the poor manuscripts. And if the manuscript has been better, these results would have been published. And this is, of course, frustrating for a young scientist. This is
I have nothing really to add. Yeah, actually, we hope actually to be teaching, kind of sharing experience with the postgraduate and graduate students, if this works, you have to work, you have to practice, we have to visit every example and sentences, and there's no much wisdom to it than, just work and work.
Thank you. Now we have some questions. The first one is, can you show the slide with the literature to read again, if you can? That was the last slide of your presentation.
Yeah, well, it will be available too. Yes,
it will be available. Yes.
But it will. Yes, it will be available. And there are some questions in the chat. Thank you very much. When can we hear more from you? So you have the contacts, the email addresses of.
Okay, so this is the slide with the literature.
I mean, it's just, it's a fun read, except the last one. He's very boring, but I had to include him.
But to answer one of the questions, when can they hear again from us? We do plan to organize a real work. This is clearly not a workshop. This is more sort of a short lecture about presentation about writing. But we do plan to organize before the end of the year So probably sometimes the end of November or beginning of December, this association plans to organize a real workshop that would last longer then, and we would have time for real interactive working on different parts of the text and seeing what the typical errors are, and mainly the audience should be younger scientists and those who are at the beginning of their academic careers and are now trying to write their first papers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. We are out of time now. The workshop was really interesting. At the end, I would like to thank all the participants. I would like to thank you, Vlado and Dado, of course. And of course, I would like to remind you on our PubMet run. So all the participants are invited to run. You can find all the information about our virtual race on our website.
Yeah.
So see you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.